Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to our /EntitledPeople, where people truly believe it's all about them and who cares about others. And today's episode is quite the lineup. It's all about smug exes thinking they're owed much more than they deserve. People are cheating, making outrageous demands, and one OP tells a story where they stole someone's mom. So yeah, sit back, relax, and enjoy the stories, guys. Let's dive in. So my ex and I separated a few months ago. Long story short, he cheated. It was enough to shatter me, but this is where we come to the point when it becomes anything but painful and turns absurd. I possess a dog. My dog, strictly speaking. I put up the money and she's under my name, and I pay for all the vet bills, food, classes, all of it. Of course, he would play with her occasionally. He would take her out for a walk every now and then, but all of a sudden, he thinks he has parent rights. In fact, this man advised me that we should have shared the dog, as though she's a timeshare or something. He even wrote me a little timetable of how many days she would be here and how many days he would get her. I told him absolutely not. This dog's my baby, my best friend, and I wouldn't give her to the guy who betrayed my trust. Well, he ran away and called me selfish and said I was out to take revenge on the dog, and that since we raised her jointly, we ought to divide half of her. Half of a dog. At the time of writing this, she's lying, snoring in my arms, secure and happy. Frankly speaking, the audacity is nearly laughable to consider. I can't believe he cheated on me and even attempted to take my dog. The entitlement is unreal. Yeah, I think we can all agree with that, OP. And a lot of people also agree with the fact that OP's ex's affair partner might have thought the dog was his, and that's why he's getting demanding. The guy has to maintain the lie. Whatever the case though, that dude deserves absolutely nothing. And this next post is an even bigger headshaker. So my late husband's ex is a crazy witch. This isn't based on anything he said. He wasn't one to badmouth people in general. At the beginning of the relationship, all he said was, "That was a very bad time in my life, and I would like to leave it in the past. I'd erase it if I could. A do-over where we never met would be even better." As we got more serious, I learned even more. She had cheated, tried to convince him to start a family with her because she was pregnant by one of her affair partners, and then maxed out all their credit cards before leaving the country. He was stuck paying it off so it wouldn't affect his credit. She returned about a year before we started dating and tried to reconnect through mutuals. He had to change his phone number twice. The second time, he also cut out a lot of his quote friends who had given his first new number to her. And then she somehow got my number. She sounded friendly enough, but 1, how did she get my number and why was she calling me? And 2, I have savvy, manipulative family members and she wasn't even amateur hour compared to them. She tried to butter me up by saying that we have so much in common because of our great taste in men. But there was something I should know about him before things got too serious. She then invoked the quote sisterhood, and how she couldn't, in good conscience, stand by and say nothing when a fellow woman was about to make a huge mistake. I let her talk because I wanted to know what kind of BS she would spew. After I hung up, both my and my husband's social circle tightened a bit more. And the thing is, her social circle decreased too. Specifically, she cut out a lot of people for allowing him to become engaged to me. How could they betray her and let that happen when she was his one and only soulmate? They were meant to be together, and they would have been if I didn't get in the way. She never really gave up, but we ignored her and we blocked her as needed. So that said, fast forward. After my husband passed away, a friend called and nervously asked how I was feeling, before leading up to whether I'd been on Facebook that day. The ex had posted a long, disgusting, tearful post on his memorial page about her loss, how heartbreaking it was to know that she would never see her soulmate, the great love of her life, ever again. She included pictures of their engagement and wedding, and she just rambled on about her utter emotional devastation and how no one could ever understand her great loss. I just deleted the post and I blocked her from the group. Seriously, the nerve of some people to swoop in and steal the spotlight in such a time. Like, what a grief thief. And OP's right, what disgusting behavior posting all of those old pictures because you know for sure she's only doing it for attention. Oh, woe is me, the love of my life. Like, that's why you cheated, got pregnant, stole money from him, and then left the country, right? This next OP gets back at her cheating boyfriend. When I was 20 to 23, I was in my first somewhat long-term relationship and my first relationship in which we lived together. It was a bit rocky. We both caused a lot of problems in the relationship, but we finally broke up when I found out my boyfriend was cheating on me regularly. The guy had also been lying about working an unpaid internship that would have transitioned to a job, which allowed him to spend hours going out with other women and excused his lack of income. So I was mostly supporting him financially, along with his mom, who he was also lying to. Even though my relationship with him was never stable, his mom loved me and would often openly take my side when we were fighting. She had 4 sons and no daughters, and she told me that she considered me the daughter she never had. So when the cheating and lying was uncovered, it wasn't hard for her to take my side. She was the person I went crying to, and I told her that this is the sort of thing you cry about to your mom. And since I don't have a relationship with my mom, I was glad she was there for me to talk to. She was of course furious with him for lying to us both, effectively scamming us out of our money and for cheating on me. Even when he complained to her about everything I'd done wrong in the relationship, she refused to believe him, because in her eyes, I could do no wrong. She sat him in front of a computer and she made him apply for jobs in front of her, and then supervised his job search process, the way one might supervise a child cooking for the first time. Once he found a job, she made him pay us both back for the money we spent supporting him while he was lying to us. After he finished paying us back and moved out of her place, she spoke to him rarely, and she was very clear that she no longer trusted him. She even warned his next girlfriend that he was a cheater, and from what I've heard, she was right too, as he apparently cheated on other girlfriends since. She and I remained close until she passed away 2 years ago. She was one of the maybe 3 people that I've ever felt I could truly be vulnerable with. I really did start to see her as a surrogate mother. This story takes place almost 12 years ago, so I'll do my best with the dialogue and details, but admittedly, some things are a little fuzzy. Most of my life, I've had a problem with picking men that were not good for me, so much so that I even had a phrase for it. The phrase was, saving the world one moron at a time. One of my more spectacularly bad choices was a guy by the name of Bob. Obviously not his real name. I met Bob when I was working one of my 2 jobs at the local mall. He worked somewhere else in the mall, so we hit it off, and soon enough, we're in a relationship. Within a few months, my lease was up and we end up moving in together, which in hindsight was a huge mistake. But I was dumb and lonely at that point. Soon enough, red flags began to fly. He would say things in common conversation that were simply incorrect, like there's only 4 continents and the rest are owned by Martian governments, and thus they don't count. When challenged, he would circular talk until you either agreed with him or dropped the subject. He would also make claims that seemed entirely unbelievable, such as when I asked where he'd been staying before his mom's house. He said he camped in the woods. When I asked how he did it for months on end and without any gear, he simply gestured to himself and he says, "This is all the gear I need, baby." The worst trait, though, by far, was his epic entitled laziness. I've never witnessed someone so lazy in my whole life. Bob was unemployed for over a third of our relationship. He would simply sit at the apartment watching Netflix or playing some war game on his computer, aka my computer, typing away in the group chat. He would also never clean up after himself, leaving dirty dishes in the sink and filth on every surface, while only taking a shower maybe once a week. The smell that permeated my apartment could only be described as revolting and could easily gag a maggot. I would inquire a few times a week on his quote job hunt, only to be dismissed or given a growing amount of excuses such as, "But I don't have a car, how would I get there?" Or, "The bus doesn't run in that area around these times," or, "The internet was down, so I can't apply." Excuses, excuses, excuses. Meanwhile, I'm working double and triple shifts at my job to try to make up the lost income and running him all over town in my time off, getting applications, and helping him fill them out and turn them in. Keep in mind, he also didn't have a cell phone, so all of these apps have my contact info on them. Thus begins the era of him, quote, holding my phone while I'm at work, so he can make calls or schedule interviews, as well as I can get a hold of him from my store phone if I needed to. Things soon began getting weird. He began staying up later and later on this group chat, sometimes until almost dawn. Sometimes we would hang out all evening until it's time for bed, and he would always make some excuses on why he needed to check the game before bed, and he would be there for hours and hours. I began to get suspicious, but nothing incriminating seemed to be taking place, so I just shrugged it off as me being insecure. And then he starts asking to use my car to go see his best friend, who we'll call Ben. Now, I wasn't super comfortable with this, but I did know Ben pretty well, and we got along almost better than Bob and I did, so I guess to a degree I trusted Ben more than Bob, and I agreed to it. This happened a few times while I was working the evening shift, and he was always back at the allotted time with my car and my phone, and relatively grateful for the opportunity to hang out with his buddies. It was suspicious, yes, but I'm the kind of person that's loyal and trusting to a fault, and I don't assume anything without proof, so I just took it at face value. That said, one day, he asked to borrow my car to go with his friends to a card gaming tournament. He put on a great show, telling me how the prize money would help us out. And with the deck he had, there's no way he could lose. I just had to let him use my car and my phone this one last time, and he would be able to buy himself a phone with the prize money. Now, I wasn't a huge fan of this idea, but nothing untoward had occurred in the previous instances, and I didn't feel like spending my only day off at a card game convention, so I gave in. I bought myself a couple of green monsters and some vodka, and I had my own little personal drunk party. Hours tick by and no Bob. Eventually, I pass out, only to wake up at the crack of dawn violently sick, and this went way beyond a hangover. I start retching in the bathroom until there's nothing left. Hours just ticked by, and I lay in my bathroom floor, sweating and convulsing, with no phone, no car, no Bob. Eventually, I was able to crawl to my room and wrap myself in a bathrobe before crawling down my apartment building stairs and began knocking on the closest doors. It took 3 apartments before somebody opened the door and allowed me to use their phone to call my mom. My mother's at my apartment in 6 minutes flat, and she rushes me to the ER, where I was diagnosed with an aggressive and antibiotic-resistant strain of C. diff. Bob finally shows up later that afternoon, phone and car keys in hand, looking very concerned. He claimed to be deeply apologetic, but my mom hated him from that point on. I was out of the hospital and back to work within a few days, but it was the beginning of the end. During these last months, we were constantly scraping by, due to his lack of consistent income and poor spending habits. As for the prize money, well, you can probably guess what happened. After an argument where I blew up on him, I was able to convince him to get a job. I knew someone who worked at a small business that was hiring, so I got him a job as a delivery man. Within a few weeks, I come home from work to find a brand new TV and entertainment system and him grinning like an idiot. I tell him we can't afford this. We can barely afford to eat and we're surviving off of scraps that I bring home from work. The whole time, he's talking about his amazing employee discount and he assures me it's no big deal. The rental fee will just come out of his check. And I was pissed. Not only had he not consulted me, but he also had me on the account as well, as he used my credit for the application. So if he flaked, I was liable. Fast forward another few weeks and the rent is late. We're receiving eviction notices on our door, and I come home from work and the TV's mysteriously gone. Thank goodness, I think. He finally realized we can't afford it and he took it back. So he gets paid, the rent gets paid, and all is good as can be. Until I find a pawn slip for the TV in his pocket while I was doing laundry and I went ballistic. He assured me that he had plans to get it back and to not worry about it. It'll be taken care of soon enough and no one will be the wiser. I was too pissed to catch on to the secrecy aspect of the situation. A few more tense weeks go by with him working mornings and myself working evenings while we shared one phone and one car, until that fateful day arrived. I woke up that morning with a migraine headache, and I opted to let Bob take the car but leave me my phone so I can call someone later on for a ride to work. A few hours of uncomfortable sleep go by when I'm awoken by my phone. I answer the phone groggy and I say, "Hello?" There is a long pause on the other end until a female voice says, is Bob there?" At that point, I felt a sickening feeling in my gut and I began to shake thinking, is this real? Am I dreaming? I respond, no, he's at work right now. This is his wife, which is a total lie. I then ask, is there something I can help you with? There is another long pause before she begins to stammer about maybe having the wrong phone number. But it was obvious that she just wanted to get off the phone with me as quickly as possible, and I realized in that moment that I desperately needed her. I said, please, I don't know what's going on, but I really need someone to tell me the truth. The last word came out in a sob, and I just sat there for a moment in silence, trying to quell the urge to just cry uncontrollably. The voice on the other end was almost gentle. She says, listen, I need to make a few phone calls, but I promise I will call you back. She said it calmly and with so much conviction that I actually wanted to believe her. I almost begged her, saying, please, you promise. She says, I promise. We hang up, and I proceed to aggressively pace my living room floor, just staring at my phone while chain smoking and muttering to myself like a crazy person. I knew who she was calling. I was replaying all those little red flag moments in my head from the last few months, pinning down dates or behavior that I found suspicious when the phone rings again. It's her. I freeze for a moment, still shocked that she followed through and called me back. Terrified of what this meant, I answer the phone, and what followed was about the most soul-crushing 45 minutes of my entire life. After initial introductions, June and I began comparing stories, and it became glaringly obvious what was happening. They'd actually been in a relationship several years prior, and they had run back into each other on the aforementioned war game where they began to flirt on group chat. All of those nights that Bob had been on the computer, he had been chatting with her. All those times he'd went to hang out with his friends, he'd been using my car to take her out, and my phone to communicate with her. And the one time I was sick and alone with no resources, you guessed it, he was with her. But it does get better. She asked me, do you have a little silver hummingbird necklace? To which I respond, yes, my mother gave it to me for my 27th birthday. I actually love it. She then says, really? Because he gave me one for Mother's Day. I ran to my room and I tore through my jewelry box and it wasn't there. It was around her neck. From there, we discovered that not only had he been giving her my property as gifts, but he had her over to our apartment, passing it off as his own apartment. I didn't want to believe it, but unfortunately, in confirmation, she began describing my apartment to a T, all the way down to my bed sheets. Finally, she utters the words I didn't know I wanted to hear. She says, "You know what we should do? We should bust this a-hole together." My mind immediately starts racing. Indeed, we should. I was a mix of fury, adrenaline, and despair, so my thinking wasn't exactly straight, and details begin to get hazy here. We arranged to meet up at my work to find a way to lure Bob over there, but unfortunately, she lived about 40 minutes away, whereas I only live 6 miles from our destination, so if I got there first, I would need to stall him, and that's assuming he wasn't out on a delivery. I call up a trusted coworker of mine at work, sobbing, begging for a ride, and he left work to come get me and bring me to my car. When I got to Bob's workplace, I went inside to retrieve my keys, and this isn't uncommon as they know the car's mine. I was stopped halfway through the store by Bob's manager, wanting to talk about the payment due on our account. I don't remember the exact dialogue, but I said something along the lines of, "Look, I don't know when you're gonna get your payment." I looked utterly defeated, and I told him we couldn't afford the TV in the first place, and how I begged Bob to take it back, and now we don't have it anymore as Bob has pawned it, and I don't have the money to get it out, let alone pay him. I was full on blubbering at that point when he stops me to clarify that his employee pawned a rental TV under contract. I confirm that this was indeed true, and I presented him with the pawn ticket, and he was mad. Apparently, this was illegal and its terms for immediate termination, but he assured me if I could get the TV back to him, there's no harm, no foul, and he would terminate my contract without penalties. I thanked him for his understanding, and I told him to let Bob know that I'd be over at my workplace. The whole time, my heart's pounding in my chest, my blood's roaring in my ears. What was I gonna say? What was he gonna say? Would June make it there before he did? My heart sinks when I see Bob making his way in my direction. He hits the door looking out of breath and guilty as heck, and I just stare at him stone-faced. He starts in with the whole, "It's not what it seems, it's a terrible misunderstanding," and I just let him dig himself deeper into his hole of lies. I just listen, nod, and pretend to understand until a particular car pulls into view. June parks in the space directly next to where we're standing, and she gets out of the car and she says, "Hey Bob, how you doing? You never told me about her." Bob's gone visibly pale. He just hangs his head and he sits on the curb saying nothing to either of us. This is when June begins berating him on his lies and deceit, while I stood there mostly in silence, agreeing at times, but mostly still in shock. After 20 minutes of her screaming at him, I finally muster up the courage to take my stand. I say to him, "We're done. I don't ever want to see you again. I'll pack up your things and your sister can contact me to pick them up. Give me your key." I held out my hand and I looked at him. He then says, "Not until I get my stuff. Then you get your key." I tried to argue, but he continued to refuse, saying it's his apartment too. He then turned and walked away, heading towards his workplace. Meanwhile, June and I talked a bit more before she hands me my hummingbird necklace and left. I just stood there alone, staring at nothing, trying to wrap my head around what transpired, and then I started crying, and oh how I cried. With nowhere else to turn, I had only one call to make, to my mom. The moment she answered, I sobbed and I told her everything, and she says, "Stay right there, I'm coming." Soon enough, both my parents pull up in my dad's truck and my mom gets out to comfort me and give me hugs. I look at the driver's seat and I just see my father with his jaw clenched, with a death grip on the steering wheel. He's just staring straight ahead. I then asked them to take me to the pawn shop, and my parents write a check for more than $500 to get the TV. We then drive over to Bob's workplace and return the TV to the manager. As the manager's finishing up the cancellation paperwork, my dad spots Bob pacing around the back of the parking lot, talking frantically on the phone. Unfortunately, I don't get to hear the ensuing conversation, but my dad marches up to him, and within a few minutes, he's holding my apartment key. He says to me, "I believe this is yours." He then says, "They're firing him." I lean back to look at my dad, and he just smirked and says, now he's jobless and homeless. We laughed about it a little, and my parents gave me some words of wisdom before leaving me to drive myself home, where my best friend's already waiting to keep me company. Bob and his sister show up a few days later for his pitiful boxes of stuff. He did try talking to me to explain, but my best friend descended on him and screamed at him, so he was shut down immediately. He left that night, and I haven't heard from him since. I blocked him on social media, but really, there was no need, as he made no effort to contact me on any level. And that's Bob, ever lazy, ever deluded, and always an a-hole. So here I am, many years later, happily married to someone, and a mother of 2 beautiful little boys, and I'm grateful to have moved on when I did. The experience with Bob certainly took its toll. I lost a lot of weight due to lack of appetite, and I had so many trust issues moving forward. But the point is I moved forward. I have grown leaps and bounds as a person since this experience, and I'm truly content with where my life is at now. But every now and then, I can't help but to wonder what happened to good old Bob. I hope nothing good. A girl can dream. What a wild roller coaster of a ride that was, guys, and I'm glad it ended off with OP living happily ever after. That said, kudos to OP for kicking the guy to the curb, although some might argue that she should have done it sooner, as that lazy entitled slob was contributing nothing. That said, despite all the things that happened with Bob, I'm also glad to know that OP had such a strong support group. From the coworker who came to give her a ride, to mom's caring words, to dad going dad mode, and her best friend saying, no excuses, go be homeless. What an amazing story. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of r/ entitled people, where people truly think they can do what they want to others. I hope you enjoyed the stories today. If you did, hit that thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/pro revenge episode, where a power-tripping boss begs OP to do his job, and OP teaches him a lesson he won't forget. It's such a wild episode, so go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.